Hello and welcome to Women's Healthspan. Today we're going to talk about the Mediterranean diet in the context of cardiovascular disease and dementia. There's one exciting aspect of today's talk, which is that one of the studies I'm going to be quoting specifically looks at women, and that is something that's refreshing and somewhat unusual. Most medical research historically even excluded women. Some nowadays is evenly divided between men and women, but women as the main focus is the minority of studies. That's unfortunate because, as we know, women may look a little different in the way that certain diseases and other factors influence them. And so we need more of this kind of research. So what about the Mediterranean diet? What is it? You've probably read about a whole bunch of diets, and this one usually comes out somewhere near the top as far as the most healthy diet for us and also for our planet. So what is involved in it? Well, it's a diet that's heavily based on whole grains, legumes, which is dried peas, beans, lentils, vegetables, fruits, fish, and chicken. The main oil in the diet is olive oil. There's not much butter in there or other liquid oils. There's some dairy, especially yogurt, and some eggs, not much red meat, and very few refined grains like white bread or rice. And almost no sweets. That's considered a treat, and not much butter, as I mentioned. You will notice that there are no highly processed foods that would fit on the list here. So that right now is around 50% of calories that Americans are ingesting. So we have a long way to go to be strictly adherent to a Mediterranean diet. The components of a Mediterranean diet contain many specific kinds of ingredients that we know are healthy for certain cell types in our body, including our gut microbiome, the organisms, the bacteria in our gut. Many of these chemicals are antioxidants, which again are healthy for a number of our organ systems. And over time, the Mediterranean diet has been thought to be helpful for diabetes, overall cancer mortality, cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's disease, depression, etc. So it's nice that we have some studies that show some of these effects more robustly. As I mentioned, the Mediterranean diet is more healthy for our environment because it diminishes the use of red meat, which is typically a negative protein and calorie factory. In other words, we feed our beef and pigs more calories and protein than we get out from the meat that we harvest from these animals. And the transportation pollution from the grains that the animals are fed and the processing the animals during their lifespan and their butchering and so on is one of the major sources of toxic oil and gas waste in our current environment. It's been estimated that if we were to switch to a more Mediterranean based diet, we would reduce our transportation oil and gas usage by about 30%, which is a pretty big number. There aren't too many disadvantages to the diet. Most people can find both things that they appreciate, their palate, what they enjoy, and cultural issues as well in this diet. It does contain some gluten, but not that many people are totally gluten sensitive and can't tolerate other portions of the diet. It is a little bit more expensive than some of the highly processed foods that will kind of hang out on our pantry shelves or in our fridge indefinitely. And there are food deserts certainly in the United States, especially in low-income areas where there aren't very many supermarkets. There's more convenience stores and fast food establishments. And the selection of especially fresh fruits and vegetables and perhaps fish might not be as good in some of these areas, even if there is a supermarket. So that's one of the disadvantages. So what about these studies? Well, one of them was from the British Medical Journal, and it was a review of Mediterranean diet and low-fat diet, as well as several others, low-carb diet, keto diets, etc. And they followed folks over a number of years for their cardiovascular and other death causes. And they noticed about a 25% reduction in cardiovascular mortality and all-cause mortality. This was for men and women. And again, I've put these references in the show notes below. The risk for stroke was also reduced by the Mediterranean diet, and for heart attack that was not fatal by about 50%. That's a big reduction. Another study in the British Medical Journal, the Heart volume, looked at women only. This is the one I was talking about earlier. And they lumped 16 studies which included about 700,000 women over time. And again, they found about a 25% reduction in risk of cardiovascular disease and all-cause mortality. You may ask, what's all-cause mortality? I'm going to die, you're going to die. Why do we put that in there? Well, during the course of a study, let's say we study people from age 60 to 70, 10 years. Most of us don't want to die in our 60s. And the studies look at the subjects who were living at the end of the study. And yes, they certainly are going to die at some point, but not during the 10 years of follow-up. So that is the definition of all-cause mortality. Whatever reason they died, that's captured in the study data, whether it's accidental or infectious disease or some other cause. The third study was from our friend, the UK Biobank, and they are studying more than 500,000 people, men and women. In this particular subset of the study, they looked at about 60,000 individuals over 60 years old and found that adherence to the Mediterranean diet led to fewer cases of dementia. And the other part of this study that was unique is because they had fairly comprehensive data about these study subjects, they were able to find the folks who had a particular genetic risk factor called ApoE4 that is known to lead to a higher chance of having Alzheimer's disease. This is why some Alzheimer's may be hereditary, familial. So even the people who had this risk factor did better if they were on a Mediterranean diet. And if you're a careful thinker about these kinds of things, you may say, well, the people who have dementia aren't as interested in having a healthy diet. And that's certainly true. That's a major issue with nutrition research. But if you start your study with folks who don't have dementia and follow them over a number of years, presumably that effect is diminished. The other major consideration for nutrition research is I can't remember what I ate yesterday, much less last week. And that is also a very valid criticism of nutrition statistical data. The way that one can get around this is to ask your study subjects on an occasional basis, at least, for recent dietary information. What did you have for breakfast today? How about dinner last night? Or now that there's apps, you can actually have people take pictures of what they're eating or write it on their cell phone. So it's getting a little bit better out there. So what's our take-home message, and maybe we should try something in this regard for today? I would say take a look at the info below on the Mediterranean diet. I pulled off a reference from Wikipedia, and it goes in a little bit more about what's in the diet and a little bit more about some of the other health impacts. And look at your own diet and see what you might tweak a little bit. Maybe you could use olive oil instead of butter on your bread, or have one meal a week that's lentils or dried beans instead of red meat, etc. Add on some fruit for dessert instead of a piece of cake, etc. I certainly have been doing much of that myself over the last year, and it did cause me to lose 10 pounds, so that was good. I needed that. I hope this is the kind of information that you find interesting and useful. If you do, please subscribe and like below. If you have anything further that you would like me to talk about, please put it in the comments below. Otherwise, ladies and friends of ladies, go on and have that healthy lifespan that you deserve. Thank you.